There's clearly an amazing amount of interest and excitement about agents. And I guess I wanted to sort of talk about how to actually start that journey, because it is definitely a journey. But before doing that, the progress in AI is actually the thing that's been enabling this. It's the reasoning models that are fundamentally getting better and better. And the thing that I really want to hammer home is that this is just the start of a journey with agents, but we think this is ultimately going to be the end state for AI and how to make that useful. So to sort of contextualize that a bit, the progress in AI is, there's a study that was done a few months ago, sort of trying to come up with a Moore's law for AI. So Moore's law being that the number of transistors on a chip doubles every 18 months, and that's the thing that basically enabled the compute revolution. Well, in AI, the doubling is happening every 7 months, and the doubling is on the time that an AI system can independently operate. And we're now at approximately 1 week of sort of human equivalent time, and that's doubling every 7 months. So these capabilities are just going to get stronger and stronger. And so talking about like the sort of impact of AI, there's clearly a disconnect between this promise and actual implementation. And so I want to talk about how we think about agents, mostly from the context of the methodology, less so on the technology, because as many people have said, the technology is there. It's how do we actually get it into the hands of our users. And so the way that we think about agents is as a new form of colleague in your team. So meet Sandra. She's an AI agent, and she is about to join your team. She's very smart, she can reason, she can plan, she can use her judgment, she's got access to tools and knows how to use them, and she can collaborate in natural language. She's also very excited to be joining your team because there's huge amounts of opportunities in life sciences for her to be able to help. There's a ton of unstructured data from different data sources. There's complex decision-making processes that need to be connected up together. And ultimately, the market incentives and competitive dynamics mean that if she can help improve the time for a drug to get to market, there's huge amounts of impact. And so how do we actually onboard Sandra into our team? There's 3 things that need to be done. So first, we need to define the job. And so that is setting up the roles and responsibilities and also deciding on the level of autonomy that we want Sandra to have. The second is around providing the context, the organizational context that means that she can actually be useful. And the third is managing her performance. So just like we would with a human, we need to be able to assess Sandra both before she starts her work, but also ongoing. And so I'm going to drill into each three of those to give an idea on the sort of the methodology that's going to help bring agents into production and actually ultimately help our users. So firstly, on defining the job. So the way that we think about this is around this OODA loop framework. And so this is making sure that any technology that we implement is actually focused on business outcomes and KPIs. And so this OODA loop framework is it's very similar to the scientific method. It actually comes from a US colonel from the 70s. He was a fighter pilot, and he wanted to help his squadrons outcompete. And this framework was very effective there, but it's also very effective in an organizational setting. And so the way that it works is you observe your environment, you get inputs in, you then form hypotheses to understand what could happen. You build up a world model. Humans do that all the time in their heads. Agents can do that very well with the various different models that we've heard all about today. Once you have those models, you need to decide what you actually want to do. And so that's taking in your actual goals and trading off different possible outcomes. Once you've decided, you act. That is doing something in the real world, and that completes the loop. You can observe what's happened, and you've got this beautiful loop. So you have to define what Sandra is actually going to do. The second thing is around the levels of autonomy. And so we think about autonomy as with these 4 different archetypes. ranging from the least autonomous through to the most autonomous. And it's very, very important to sort of emphasize here that when we talk about agents, we're not talking about fully autonomous systems. In fact, I think most agents are going to be human in the loop, or at least human over the loop. And so it's very much making sure that humans stay in control of these important decision-making processes. So our Scout is the least autonomous. Again, following the OODA loop framework, it can surface information, but it provides no judgment, no recommendations. We've got our Analyst, which does provide recommendations for suitable strategies, but it's ultimately the human that decides and the human that acts. We've then got the Operator, which, again, provides recommendations. Human has to decide, but once a human has decided, can then act in the world. And then you've got your Autopilot, which is fully autonomous. And I guess just to give a few examples here. So a Scout, you could imagine that being a research assistant surfacing information to analysts. An analyst agent, maybe that would be a study design agent that is performing simulations, creating scenarios, but ultimately it's a human in the loop. An operator, maybe that's someone that's surfacing information from databases. Human would decide what to do, but then it can act upon it. And then finally, a autopilot. In the life sciences context, I would imagine that could be something like in a commercial setting, healthcare provider wants to flag something. The agent's responsibility is to get all of the necessary information and then pass it on to a different part of the business. So we've defined the job. Now we need to provide the context to the agent, and this is critical. So the way that I think about this is if you'd hired like genius level person out of university, on the first day of their job, they would be basically useless. They don't have any context on the organizational setting. They don't know how things work. They don't have access. And the same is true for these off-the-shelf models. They are close to genius level good at all sorts of tasks out of the box because they're trained on public information. But if they're deployed just naively into an organization, they're also useless. And so you have to give them the context. And we do this through our computational twin framework, which allows you to structure your organization and provide all of the necessary policy documents, procedures, metrics that you care about, the different stages. And that allows you to ground the agent in the operational context. The other thing that this enables is it allows you to simulate possible scenarios. And so we've done this a lot in the context of life sciences, simulating forward possible clinical trial plans, site selection, this type of thing. And the nice thing here is that a lot of the investments that you'll have made in the tools and the technologies that you're already using can be used by agents as tools themselves. And so you can get this nice combination of building up a world model and the context for an agent, but that can also be used as part of a simulation framework. And so the benefits here, firstly, you have to ground the agent in the operational context. It's the thing that gives it the actual performance. By providing it the context, the agent can also look into the future. Now, look into the future is too grandiose a statement, but it can scenario plan, it can run simulations, it can use all of the tools and systems that you've already invested in and make the most of them. You need to be able to trust these things, and actually trust is the most critical thing. I'll get onto that in a second, but that's so critical. And then we've heard a lot about these multi-agent systems, but the real value is going to be when we can connect agents together. So, we've defined the job, we've given the agent context. How do we actually manage its performance? Well, the first thing we need to do is be able to interact with it. Now, the nice thing about agents and large language models is that they're very good at communication. You can talk to them in natural language in the way that you would a human, but the really great thing is you've got extreme transparency and granularity on what the agent is doing. So you can see all of the reasoning steps, all of the logical steps, and you can use that both for improving the agent, but also from an audit perspective. And so this is something that it's net better because you can inspect inside the brain, which unfortunately yet we can't do that with humans. So the second thing in terms of managing performance is evaluating that performance. And there's two critical phases. The first is on the onboarding of the agent, so before the agent is actually allowed to be part of any decision-making loops. And the second is ongoing. And there's both qualitative and quantitative approaches to that. The quantitative approaches, you need to be building out some ground truth data sets, some golden data sets that are specific to the decision that you're trying to work on for that agent, and use that to assess the performance. But one thing I'd say is that you don't need to do too much of that. Because of this framework around autonomy, you can release into production these agents with lower levels of autonomy and use them as data capture mechanisms. So they can start to build up the evaluation data sets. As users interact with them, they give feedback, they start to sort of upvote, downvote the responses. So it can be very powerful. Then the final thing on managing performance is establishing guardrails. So even with the best evaluations in the world, you still want to be able to put some constraints on the agent behavior. And that's what guardrails do. And so we think about guardrails with two types. First is the blocking type, which will just do a hard block on anything. And so we've seen a lot of examples with customers around the tone of voice when communicating with users or end customers, that like you must be following that. And then we've got threshold, which are more policy-based. So if, for example, you have an agent that's communicating with a healthcare provider and the response, they're just not responding enough, the agent is allowed a level of autonomy, 2 or 3 responses, but if it goes beyond that, then maybe you would threshold, block it, and it would get escalated to a human. And so you get these nice interactions. You can define the level of autonomy for an agent, but you also have escalation approaches so that your teammates can see what's going on and take action. And so this has very much been in the context of a single agent and a single decision. But the true value of agents, as we've heard a lot about, is when there's multiple interacting together. And that's where you can, when you're mapping out a business process, you can start to find the bottlenecks and deploy different agents onto different settings. And so, for example, in this use case, we've got an agent that is a research assistant. It's a scout. It can surface information to humans. That's then getting passed on to a study design agent that is not allowed to make decisions, but once the decision has been made, it can start to write out protocols and whatnot. So there's this whole connected chain. And one thing I'd say is that the sort of mapping of the business process and getting this process into software does become a very valuable way to move quickly and to iterate fast. So that was all I had to say on agents and how to scale them out effectively. We are faculty, a UK-based AI company. We've been going for 10 years, and we don't just work in life sciences. We work across the economy, government, defense, national security, healthcare, you name it. We were 10 in September last year, and we put together this book of 10 lessons for making AI effective in organizations. So lesson 8 is building in incremental steps, which is very much how we think about agents. And so if you'd like a copy of that book, please email me, and I can provide that. Thank you very much.